I would like to call to order our special Board of Aldermen meeting for October 16th, 2020. If you would, we'll have our invocation by Reverend Lowe Davis, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Almighty, most gracious Lord, we thank you for the creation that you have given us to take care of. Guide us to make wise decisions by your example and by your word. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and
Thank you, Reverend Davis. Item D is the approval of the agenda, and you see that there's just one item on the agenda, the discussion of the sewer service agreement with Brunswick County. I'll entertain a motion. Motion by Mr. Lombardi. Second by, it was a tie, Mayor Pro Tem and Reverend Davis. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. Motion carried. I'll read the ethics statement. If any members know of any conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest with respect to matters on the agenda, please so state at this time. Okay. Thank you. I would just like to make a brief comment, and then we will continue our discussion. I always like to bring in some historical perspective, and from time and tide. This is from September 2nd, 2020. The pilot for September 1st, 1965, 55 years ago, reported that bids for the construction of a new sewer treatment plant for Southport had been opened. So we're coming a long way in 55 years. We had our meeting in February, and it was a discussion of the wastewater treatment agreement with Brunswick County. And I said at that time, this is an important issue for our city. It is a complex discussion. It involved growth projections, population, existing flow, hurricanes. There was an intuitive aspect to it. And there was the capacity issue in working with Hatem and Sawyer and those engineers. We settled on 750,000 gallons per day. And this proved to DEQ to be the best number to serve our city. And as you know, in Southport in 2019, the sewer issue was one of the defining issues of that 2019 campaign. And so as one of the engineers said, and I quote, "It has been a unique path that this has taken," and that is true. The city was initially going with the county for sewer services, and then decided to build their own plant. The location of the plant was a major issue. The location of the proposed plant was moved. Now with the new Board of Aldermen and Mayor, who all campaigned on regionalization of services. And that was the key, regionalization of services. So now this is the time that we're going to move forward, because we are now at the point we're going to have a permanent solution to Southport's sewer needs. And again, I want to thank everyone who's worked on this. We've had engineers, we've had attorneys, and again, I want to thank Hazen and Sawyer, Tim Devine, Todd Johnson, and Colin Beck for their work. I want to thank the county for working with us, their public works department, their county manager, their city attorney, our city manager, our city attorney. All the aldermen have spent hours looking at this. In our public works, I mean, no one knows the sewer system better than Tom and David Fox. So we depend on each other. We're at a point now where I think we can move forward, and I'm just very proud of everyone and the work that they've done on this. Like I say, we're moving forward in history from 55 years ago to today. So I would like to call on our city manager for his comments. Mr. Hargrove.
Thank you, Mayor Hatem. While I wasn't a participant in your budget retreat, I understood when I came on board that coming to a sewer service agreement with the county was of utmost importance. In fact, it was your number one priority. It's been something that we've been working diligently on ever since I've gotten here, and I think at this point we're to the end of the road with it, hopefully. In front of you, you can see that I handed out before the meeting the memorandum from our attorney, Mr. Gray Stiers, where he gave you an analysis of this agreement. I hope you have all taken the time to read this and digest what it has to say. On the back of that, you'll see we've done average flows for about the last 12, 14 months of what Southport has had. So you can see by these numbers that we do have some built-in capacity for this 0.75 million gallons that the county is going to allocate us by this agreement we're getting ready to enter into. It's been a carefully thought out decision. It's been a tough negotiation. It's been contentious at points. I think we're there. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to our city attorney, Mr. Mike Eisenberg.
Can I ask a quick question before we do that?
Absolutely.
Why did we have such a drastic increase in flow starting in this June? We went from 423,000 in May to 749,000 in June. Was it just rain?
And it was also 2 months that they were pretty high, not only supposedly. And just from what the Todd Johnson of Hazen and Sawyer said, he was not surprised to see that with the amount of rain, amount of INI that Southport has, and that type of thing. And Mr. Fox, if you could, if you want to expound on that, but he said it didn't surprise him. And he said that it should not affect our overall decision to go with 750,000 gallons per day. Be happy for you to comment if you want to come up, and because I want to make sure that we all, understand what we're.
In addition to it going up from May to June, if you look, last August was 468, and this August was 655. So I'm just curious as to what the increase was about, if we know.
Typically, it was a rain event and the storms. Typically, during that, we go up 40, 50,000 gallons a day when we have them events. The West Side Sewer was put in 1913. It's clay pipes. We have rehabbed, 60 brick manholes. That helped on the inflow, but the I&I that's still coming in on the cracked pipes and what the mayor stated there, it's due to rainfall and ground table.
Think the House Street project's going to have a significant impact on that?
It will have some bearing on it. That's a good distance there. It will have quite a bit, probably, but I couldn't give you a number, but it will help significantly.
The engineers agreed with that. They realized that the fact that House Street, that's a long distance, a lot of pipe, they thought that's why, one of the reasons we would be okay, because of that improvement in that infrastructure.
To follow up with Alderman Allen's question, June and July of this year, that we did not have the 4th of July festival crowds that we have usually, and yet we are awfully close to our capacity limit. And I realize that if you average it out over the year, we're okay, but given that we did not have those crowds, and yet we are that close, for those 2 months. Should we be concerned?
Well, the 4th of July festival, sure, we got public restrooms. They handle some of the flow. We may have some visitors here using bathrooms, but very few of the restaurants have that big of a flow of use. And there's a lot of, the 4th of July, there's a lot of porta johns here, just to be honest with you. They're taking the bulk of the flow of all them people, not our sewer system.
That's reassuring.
Public bathroom, sorry about that. It does, play a role in it, but not that significant. So the 4th of July, I wouldn't think it's going to impact significantly or cause anything, to hurt anything. We could handle that flow.
Other questions for Mr. Fox? All right.
I don't want to waste time and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it just seems almost, it's hard to believe that in September of 19 we had a hurricane, and in August of 20 we had a hurricane, and yet the August numbers are 200,000 gallons a day more than September of 19. Just seems very strange to me.
Right. Gordon, and I know you did, all these, are they based on 30 days, 31 days? Or is it 30? Average. Okay, because you know what I mean, because some are 30, some are 39, 31, then we have a 29 on, so it will change a little bit on daily flows. Now, we could go back on rain event datas. We did not have, we did have I'd have to go back, we did have a spill last year, and it was due to a heavy rain event. And I would guess that that's what that was, because we pretty well stay consistent to the norm averages.
I'd like to add one thing as well, on top of the rain events as well. We know what happens during high tides, extreme high tides. And during high tides, even though we have infiltration covers on the manholes, there are at least 3 manholes on the Yacht Basin and Bay Street that are underwater during high tides. So anytime you have a significant high tide like we do, where West Bay Street and the Yacht Basin is underwater, there is going to be inflow into those manholes. I don't know what days created this significant increase in flow for these months, but I could guarantee you that when Bay Street is underwater, there's a lot of water going into the sewer line, which goes straight to Bay Street Pump Station, which obviously heads out and is what's calculated in that flow as well. I just wanted to add that one thing.
We catch Nick. Some of our citizens have a bad habit. They got a yard full of water, and there's a low cling out. We've caught them opening them up and letting the water go, drain their yards. We've stopped them. We've caught them doing that. That happens to it sometimes.
Okay, since the last time we discussed this, we've been in negotiation with the county. Mainly, I have been reviewing things and talking on the phone and corresponding with Gray. Gray has done the direct communication with the county attorney, while Gordon, I think, has talked a little bit with the county manager. We've got a few concessions at least, and we've gone back and added a few words here and there. We've made it clear that Southport has the absolute right to serve any property within its city limits, and that would include, if somehow we're able to annex any more property, it would include that. Plus, we're able to, and this wasn't in their first drafts, plus we will be able to keep any customer that we currently have when the agreement's signed, no matter whether they're in the city limits or not. So we've had that language inserted since the last time. We've had a little bit of language taken out that they wanted in, but one of the absolute no negotiation on, according to the county attorney, was a sewer service district. Okay, they're not going to agree to that. They made that clear, and that's where we started negotiation with. We've got to make sure that we have every customer that we currently have, and so we did get that language put in. I think you guys have got a memo from Gray today, and I think you got his review of the contract the other day with what he thought would be the proper motion to make today. There's a few other little loose ends to tie up. As you saw from today's email, he would like to put in a paragraph regarding cooperation between the parties and everything. So the motion, if you decide to go that way, I've written one out, and Gray has reviewed it, so we want to make sure that we still have a little authority to correct some wording in there and everything, as long as it does not change the meaning of the contract itself.
Any questions for the city attorney?
I have a question for somebody. I don't know. I don't think it's for Mike, but you want me to go ahead, or you got something else you want to do first? I guess it's for Gordon or David. So we're borrowing roughly $25 million. I assume we arrived at that amount on the basis of what the county has indicated the cost of the project is going to be, the expansion of the plant and the new line to run out. How good do we feel about the accuracy of that number, and what happens if that number is not accurate and the actual cost is more than that?
That's a very good question. I spoke with the Division of Water Infrastructure this morning, and one of the things that had been a concern going into last evening was there's a clause in there about the county being able to make upgrades or enhancements to the expansion of the treatment plant. And in my conversation with the Division of Water Infrastructure, I expressed that concern, and he said that they were not going to, in his words, he said they're not going to let them build a Cadillac when a Ford will do the job. So there will be some oversight from the project manager that's in charge at Division of Water Infrastructure. He doesn't anticipate this to be a problem. He does, however, there is an unknown that we will not know yet when the package goes out to bid. We have, or the engineers with the county have planned this out, and they expect this expansion to cost right around the $25 million mark. However, we will not know 100% sure until it goes out to bid. That's one of the reasons that Gray wants us to put in the cooperation agreement into the contract, so that we both work together to ensure that the city our money is being well spent. So the worst case scenario is that could come in overbid, and at that particular time we could go back to the Division of Water Infrastructure and ask for more money. That's really the caveat right now. It's you don't know what you don't know. He said, they've been pleasantly surprised here recently with some of the projects that have gone out to bid have actually come in for less money. The key being is that you're going to have multiple competitive bidders is what will drive that.
There is some ability to go back to the state and adjust the amount that we're borrowing then. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct.
And along those lines, do you feel like, and this is no reflection on our Public Works Department, because I love them and they do a great job, but they are taxed nearly beyond their ability to do their current job. Do we need to retain an engineering consultant to help us oversee the process of this project being bid, built, and implemented?
Absolutely.
I strongly advise that we do.
I would want to say that may be a good idea, but in effect, you know, you're going to be paying the engineer that is looking over it for the county too. I mean, so you are basically,
Right.
you are paying an engineer to do
Sure.
that.
But he doesn't have what you might call a fiduciary responsibility to the city, though. And he works for the county. He's looking after the county's best interest. I think we need somebody that's looking after our best interest.
Okay, I just want, you know,
And
I don't disagree. I just wanted to make sure you understand that in effect, you're going to be paying two different
Sure.
engineers to do
Well,
the same job.
I understand, but I think with $25 million at stake, the amount of money we'd pay a second engineering consultant is going to be minuscule.
Mr. Eisenberg.
Alderman Allen, I would hate to just have to sit back and take what they serve us, you know?
Mr. Eisenberg, I printed this document out a few days ago. You're saying that we'll be able to, anyone who will be annexed in will also be available on,
Any property within the city limits, we get the service.
okay, on section 1.10, it's City of South, it basically says, anything connected or being served by the city as of the date of this agreement. That's been changed.
No, I mean, I don't have that in front of me, but doesn't it say that we have the sole right to serve all property within the city limits as well as all property that we're currently serving?
At the date of this agreement. Okay, I
Yep.
understand what you're saying now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, even if there's property in the city limits, maybe on the outskirts, for instance, that doesn't have sewer now, if they get sewer, we got the right to do that automatically if they're in the city limits. Plus, you know, and that includes like River Mist is in the city limits and Jersey Mike's and things like that. Plus, we get anybody outside the city limits that's currently being served by the city, residential or commercial.
And anyone that would voluntarily annex in.
Gordon and Public Works are preparing an exhibit that will be attached to the contract that will designate and list all the properties outside the city limits that we serve, so there will be no confusion.
That list has been completed and forwarded to our attorney.
I have a couple of questions. Do we have any sense of how the county commissioners are going to receive this? Have they indicated, do we know whether they have seen it and are likely to agree to it if we agree?
Yeah, we've got correspondence from the county attorney who said that, you know, he said, obviously, I can't guarantee how the Board of Commissioners is going to vote, but he said he's very, very confident that with the changes we've made so far and everything, that they will be approved by the county commissioners. And he said, especially since he's going to recommend approval, and he said their current staff, including their engineer, also are going to recommend approval.
Well, that's good news. Second question, if we approve this contract, does that leave the door open for a different kind of an arrangement with the county in which the county would take over the city's sewer services?
Yeah, I mean that's a possibility, and they've expressed some interest in doing that, but that would be a completely separate negotiation and contract. That wouldn't be covered at all in this one, because we got to get going on this one. And then, of course, if they took over, you know, that contract would have some language about phasing this out or terminating this one.
So this doesn't close the door
Okay, I'm sure you've read in the, from Mr. Stiers that there's some protection that NCDEQ is making a low-interest loan available for the benefit of Southport, and DEQ should have an interest in seeing that the funds are efficiently used, for that purpose. So there is some oversight. In terms of an engineering firm to look over this, again, we have a relationship and certainly have spent a lot of time and resources with Hazen and Sawyer, and it was when they advised us to go back to regionalization that actually hurt them, because they were going to be the ones that were going to build Southport's wastewater treatment plant. So they certainly could be someone that the city could contact if the board would like. And also there's something in the agreement I think we should mention that was important, is that again from the engineers, they wanted to, in the old contract, the contract could be nullified just by one party. Here there has to be, Section 5 allows termination only by mutual agreement of the parties. Beforehand, the county could have made the contract null and void, and Southport would not have any recourse. So we want to make sure that the monies are spent properly, that it comes within budget, not terribly over budget, and things like that, and however the board wants to move in that regard in terms of engineering oversight. But the NCDEQ does have a responsibility to make sure that the funds are spent properly and things are being done in a proper way.
That's an excellent point, because DEQ is not just going to send you $25 million and say, hey, go build the plant. I mean, they're going to approve when you make requests for payments and you request funds. After the county sends you their request, basically, since the money comes to you, you forward that on to them, and they're going to have oversight over it too, to make sure that it's being done properly and what has been requested to be paid for has been done. That was an important point of Gray's memo this morning to you.
I think of particular interest to our citizens is there a, do we have a definable way of measuring right now how this will impact rates for our sewer customers? Yes.
I actually can address that. We started back in, I'm not sure now, 17, 18, 19, Melanie, I can't remember. We attended workshops with the School of Government infrastructure organization, and we did a rate analysis based on that 25 million basically. And so we are already have that all planned for, and it was determined, Hazen and Son actually reviewed our rates, and they concurred that we were on target with how to do that. So they were incrementally, and I'm not sure is there one more increase in 21, and then it just is percentage, just like cost of living more or less? We're there. So then what our rates are now are what they'll be, with the exception of like 2% a year. It's some small cost of living increase.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Are we saying that there is definitely going to be somebody overseeing this to represent the city? Or do we have to hire somebody?
Well, I think what John's point was, I mean, we've got DEQ, of course, is going to be to some degree overseeing it, but
they're going to oversee it after a request for money is.
Yes, they're going to make sure that all your requests are legitimate for the money. But no, and one of the things that Gray recommends in this is maybe having a consulting engineer look at the design as prepared by the county engineer, so that our engineer can see if he sees any issues with that. So he does suggest that's a good possibility, and that's what John just brought up too. For you to go ahead and go to the extra cost of making sure that we got somebody that's just looking out for Southport, you know.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. John, were you figuring that they would have a daily oversee of this project?
I don't think daily, but, I mean, I think we need to have somebody who's interfacing frequently. I mean, it's going to vary, obviously, but we need to have somebody who's going to be interfacing with the county and with DEQ, making sure, go ahead and look at it now, you know, before we get too far down the road, make sure the design looks right, make sure it's going to do what it needs to do, make sure it's being, that it's designed to be the most cost-effective that it can be, make sure that, you know, oversee the bid when the bids come in, examine them, make sure they're good, they look like they're in line, that we're getting the best deal we can, you know, work, once construction starts, work with county, you know, to make sure that, you know, that it's being built properly and that there aren't, you know, unnecessary change orders, unnecessary cost overruns, whatever. Work with DEQ to, you know, make sure the documentation's appropriate and is done in a timely fashion, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think it's going to be a daily thing.
No,
but,
okay,
I
and
mean,
the county wouldn't have any problem with that?
I don't know that DeGray has discussed that directly with the county, but I mean, it's our money. I think we would have the right to do that. And I think John's right that we need to get it, if you want to do that, you know, I mean, you don't hire them today, but you need to get them involved before it goes out to bids and you know, to review the design and everything, to make sure that, you know, for instance, I think, who was it, Gordon said something about DEQ's going to let them build maybe a Ford or something, but not a Cadillac. So we want to make sure that the system's designed well enough, but not, you know, overly well for our needs and everything.
I agree with John. I think that's a good idea, and maybe our consultants, like you mentioned, maybe that's the way to go.
The most important is up front, that they look at the whole design. It's not like they're going to start building tomorrow. I mean, we need to look at the design. We've already spent $1 million on some sort of design, so we need to have whichever group you want to use, whether it's Hazen and Sawyer or whomever, to look at the upfront design, the estimates, and that type thing. And I certainly agree with having that aspect. And the other aspect is trust. We have to trust each other. We trust in the county, the DEQ, our engineers. I mean, I would think everyone would want to pull in the same direction to make sure this is efficient and successful. This is a county-wide. It affects the whole county, not just Southport. I mean, this is the, you know, West Brunswick treatment plant expansion. It is a big project. $25 million is a lot of money, and we have to have trust in each other, and we have to have verification as well. So I think once these plans are out, they should be reviewed by someone that the Board of Aldermen has chosen to look at, and then move forward from there. I agree with you, Alderman Allen. It's not an everyday, you know, process, having somebody out there every day. That certainly doesn't work. But anyway, so yes, wholehearted, again, it's the board's decision.
Trust but verify.
Yes.
Melon?
Hang on, do we need to include in our motion that we are going to authorize the city manager to hire some type of engineering consultant?
I think the first step, he would have to get to do a request for qualifications. I think we know who we may want to use, but I mean, he's got to, you know, he's got to do that.
Do we have an existing contract with Hazen and Sawyer? Is that correct?
Yeah,
Is
they're
it an
still
open-ended
considered
contract?
consultants. Yes, they're still considered consultants as far as I know.
Can we simply extend that if that is the desire of staff to do, or do we have to go out and do a whole request for qualifications all over?
Well, it's going to depend on what that contract says. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's open-ended or not. If it's open-ended, of course, I think maybe the first thing to do would be for Gordon to make contact with them and you make sure they're willing to do that, you know, to kind of be the overseeing another engineer, you know what I mean, to make sure they're willing to do that. And then I think, you know, at that time, I think you would be justified in hiring them. You know, normally when you hire and the contract's over $50,000, the law requires you to get qualifications for more than one engineer. But you can opt out of that if for some reason you feel like they're more qualified, for instance, their prior experience. So that would be the most you would have to do. Let's say if this contract is over and not open-ended, then you would need to pass a resolution waiving the qualification process because of your experience and their knowledge with them, and then you could contract directly with them. But you may not have to do that if this contract that we've signed is open-ended enough, you know, for just to proceed under it.
Okay, well, I think it's fair to say, and everybody can speak up if you disagree, but I think the consensus of the board for Gordon is to look into that and start, move forward and figure out a way that we can have somebody on board.
I hate to be contrary, but with the last board, Hayes and Sawyer was all for building a plant. And then when the new board comes on, they're all for not building a plant. They seem to move with the wind. I'd like to look at different alternatives.
I have a question about the, you know, we have paid over $1 million for the design process already. Do we know that whether that design is still the valid design? Is that what they're going with?
Kind of our own plant, wasn't it?
I don't think so. No, that's
He's
Signed
talking
the
about the
West
county.
the money we
Brunswick
paid the
treatment.
county.
Yeah, because we paid them $1 million to do that design. And in terms of Hazen and Sawyer, it was beneficial for them. They would have rather built the plant, but when they looked at the numbers and everything, they were forthcoming enough to say, well, you're better off economically regionalizing and going with the county. It really, I don't think they were swayed by an election. I don't think they even were keeping an eye on our election as much as they were at looking at all the different options. But for them, it would have been better off for them to build a plant.
The $1 million was the engineering study for the county's plan.
Yeah.
We have not paid that $1 million, right?
I believe we paid maybe $100,000 back, Melanie. Yeah, we've made one installment payment on it, but you're right. That $1 million is their engineering costs for our expansion.
And that's included in the 25 million that we're borrowing.
Melanie, is the grant writer that got the loan going to oversee the grant, the administration of the grant? I mean, of the loan? Yeah, so that would still continue to be.
Okay, I do have a motion that I would like to read and see if the board feels like this is a reasonable motion. And I would like to read it. And first part of the motion is to approve entering into the West Brunswick Regional Wastewater System Sewer Service Regional Participant Agreement with Brunswick County. Second part of the motion is to authorize the city manager and city attorneys to negotiate any minor revisions to the agreement that improve and clarify the rights of the city so long as the substantive terms of the agreement are not altered. And the third part of the motion, to authorize the mayor to execute said agreement upon advice of the city manager and city attorneys.
So moved.
For a motion?
Yes.
I so moved.
motion by Mr. Allen and a second by Lo Davis. Open to any discussion.
I have some comments.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure these are my comments. I'm not speaking for anybody else at the table. The deliberation about the future of Southport's sewer system has been a long and protracted conversation with stops and starts, relying on experts to guide our decisions regarding a $25 million project. First to go with the county, then to build our own, and now resuming negotiations with the county. The citizens of Southport have overwhelmingly voiced their support for the city to buy sewer capacity from the county instead of building our own treatment plant. In January of this year, our newly elected mayor and the board reached out to the county for what we believe would be a simple process of resuming the previously negotiated contract with the terms the county had previously offered the city. Unfortunately, over the months that have followed, we learned that the Brunswick County Commissioners were not offering the previous terms of the contract to the citizens of Southport. The previous contract written by the county had advantages for the county and advantages for the city. Among them, Southport gave the county a portion of our service area within our city limits, and for Southport, Southport was supposed to retain Southport's sewer district designation. It is important for Southport to retain our sewer district. First, economy of scale. As our city grows and we expand our sewer infrastructure, just like with the county, long term, the maintenance and service becomes more affordable. Secondly, the only carrot Southport has to offer development for voluntary annexation is sewer without a designated without a designated sewer district, as development continues outside of our city limits, but in the ETJ communities that do not annex into the city, they will not be contributing city taxes to help maintain our city's resources. For example, future development on Robert Ruark, which is at the edge of our city limits in the extraterritorial jurisdiction, or the ETJ as it's called, with a planned 200 homes will be using our city's infrastructure, sidewalks, roads, our city's parks, and facilities. If the developers do not annex into the city, those 200 properties will be using resources but not contributing taxes necessary to maintain them. Southport's future zoning decisions and whatever type of future development happens within the ETJ is a separate issue from retaining a sewer district designation. Southport Sewer District was originally approved by the Brunswick County Commissioners to give Southport the opportunity to grow. It appears that according to the proposed terms of the contract now being offered by the city, Southport will be competing with Brunswick County for sewer customers, even in the extraterritorial jurisdiction, the 1 mile area immediately outside our city limits that is under the jurisdiction of Southport's Unified Development Ordinance. It's worth noting that in the past, Southport, if Southport thought that the county could better serve a community, Southport has allowed the county to provide that service within their district. Without growing our tax base, the limited number of actual Southport taxpayers within the existing city limits, approximately less than 4 square miles, will continue to have the sole responsibility to maintain the city now and into the future, a future that most certainly will result in higher and higher taxes for the small base of Southport's taxpayers to meet the ever-growing demands of development outside of the city limits, utilizing the city's infrastructure and facilities. Most Southport citizens are surprised to learn that Robert Ruark and Jabbertown are not within Southport city limits and do not pay city taxes. The Southport Wastewater Project is going to cost Southport taxpayers roughly $25 million. it has been a long process, and I certainly appreciate that the county, Brunswick County Commissioners are fatigued with the process and our due diligence. And quite honestly, I understand their frustration. With that said, it is in the long-term best interest of the citizens of Southport and ultimately Brunswick County to allow Southport to retain the ETJ as the designated sewer district. I would ask that the city manager, that before you sign the contract, please reach out to the county manager and ask ask the Brunswick County Commissioners just one more time to please reconsider their refusal and allow the citizens of Southport to retain the extraterritorial jurisdiction, the ETJ, as the city's sewer district. And that said, for me, I support the motion to pursue an agreement with the county and to join the county's regional sewer system for the benefits that come with the economy of scale, and but also with the knowledge that the city of Southport would be better served if Brunswick County would allow Southport to have a smaller designated sewer district that included the ETJ, the area within a mile of our city limits that is, again, under the Southport Unified Development Ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Any other comment? Mr. Spencer.
I don't have prepared statements. I never do. I need to probably do that more often. I cannot sit here and not be true to myself and tell you that I was wholeheartedly convinced that we should build a wastewater treatment plant. There were a lot of reasons. I'm being the one who has grown up here, am not afraid of growth. Matter of fact, I know we need growth because the residents that are here can't really afford to pay the bills. And if we are limited to who can pay, and we're put in a zone where we can't expand, the future is bleak. So I was 100% convinced in a wastewater treatment plant so that we could bring in some commercial and other things that would help pay the bill rather than the residents. I don't know if it's fair to say that an election was based on one or two things. You're sort of generalizing a statement that everyone voted for this particular reason. I think that there were a lot of reasons. But needless to say, I was left at the table, and new people were brought in, and the decision has been made to move forward. And I don't think that it's time to argue. I think it's time to move forward and to get this completed, because there are a lot more things that need to be done, and we can't keep stirring the water. We need to move forward with a lot of needed issues. So I'll be voting for this, but I'm not ashamed of saying that I was for a wastewater treatment plant. Controlling our own destiny. I don't lease a vehicle. I own one. I don't like paying for something and not owning it in the end, and that's what this felt like. So again, I'll move forward. I appreciate all the hard work.
I have a question. Do I understand that you would prefer that we go back to the concept of having our own sewer plant?
I was convinced that we could build a sewer plant and that we would have more capacity and we could service an area that might include our ETJ, but we're beyond that now.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any further discussion?
I do. I do want to say, I don't know if it was clear to everybody. I'm going to move my mask down a little bit. The mayor just made a comment several minutes ago referring to the fact that the engineers that the city had hired a year or so ago to design the city's own sewer plant once they took a look at the economics of it all, they recommended that we not build our own sewer plant. This was not a political recommendation on their part at all. And as the mayor said, this was not something that had anything to do with the election. They did an analysis and came up with this and said, this is a bad idea. I believe that was a December special session with them or something.
I was in different meetings before you got to this board, and they were just as adamant about building at the time. So it is confusing to me how they could all of a sudden change with a new administration. And that's why I questioned whether we should move forward with that consulting forum in the future.
Well, for the future, it's we and will you as a board set the policy. The engineers put the policy into effect. It's not the other way around. I don't think they were adamant about. Someone contacted them and hired them, which is, what you do. So the board sets the policy. You set the policy, and then the engineers put that policy into motion through the city manager. So I understand what you're saying, that it was adamant that the city should build their own plant, but it's not the engineers are following the policy of the will of the board and the people and that type thing, not the other way around.
Yeah, I would agree. They were simply performing the task as they were instructed to perform it.
Okay, the task at hand again is the motion, and I'm gonna read it one more time. To approve entering into the West Brunswick Regional Wastewater System Sewer Service Regional Participant Agreement with Brunswick County. To authorize the city manager and city attorneys to negotiate any minor revisions to the agreement that improve and clarify the rights of the city so long as the substantive terms of the agreement are not altered. And to authorize the mayor to execute said agreement upon advice of the city manager and city attorneys. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. There are none opposed. It passes unanimously. Thank you. Appreciate the work of the board on this and city staff, city manager, Mr. Hargrove. Thank you, city attorney, Mr. Eisenberg. This has been a long journey, but a successful journey. It begins with the first step, and I think we're there. Thank Public Works for their guidance in this, in that regard. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor? All right. Motion carried. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.